I'll be up to Scott.
Thank you, Chair Carter. For the record, Scott McMullen, 864 Irving, Astoria. I work for the Oregon Fishermen's Cable Committee. I prepared a letter to submit to OPAC, and I think Andy has read the letter yet. But rather than read it, based on the conversation this morning, I thought it would be helpful to maybe address some of the questions that Charlie had. What are the differences between the OPAC recommendation and the recommendation that the Department of Land Conservation and Development, or the Commission, Land Conservation and Development Commission, adopted? The first one I'd like to address is this constitutional issue that Steve Shipsey brought up. His term for it was an illegal delegation of authority to a third party. What that means is the states, I think there's long constitutional history that you can't, an entity like the state of Oregon can't allow a third party to have the authority to approve a permit or to accept the permit, accept or deny a permit application. The history of that with OPAC was this all concerns the proprietary use and management areas, PUMAs they're called. And that would be an area that already has an authorized use. For example, Twin Rocks Sanitary District has an ocean outfall pipe. So they already have an authorized use, it's permitted, it's gone through the straight process, they've got an area allocated to them. Like Oceanside has one also. Submarine cables, each submarine cable has to go through a permitting process in an authorized area. And initially when OPAC looked at this, they said, PUMAs, marine renewable energy off limits for PUMAs. They're already got an authorized use. We shouldn't have any other use in that area. Protect those existing uses. However, OPAC passed the baton off to TESPAC at some point. Even we had made the decision no to marine renewable energy in a PUMA. We gave our total recommendations to TESPAC, the state land conservation development department's advisory body on this issue. And they said, well, how about if, and only if, the authorized user said, okay, could wave energy be then allowed in those sites? And TISPAC said, yeah, we think that that could be allowed if, but if and only if the authorized user gave their permission. And that came back to OPAC, and OPAC accepted the TISPAC recommendation for this alteration. So we went from no to no unless the authorized user says okay. But what happened on the morning of the Land Conservation Development Commission meeting, Mr. Shipsey brought in paper and said, we can't allow this delegation of authority. And so that last passage, it's in bold in the letter that I handed out. It's just 9 words, but that last passage has been removed. Well, what that does is it completely subverts the intent of OPAC. So it goes from a no or a no with permission, no unless permission, to a yes. It completely does a 180. That's why the OFCC, the North American Submarine Cable Association, and one of the OFCC cable owners all got on board the amicus to support this thing. We feel that's wrong. It completely changed OPAC's intent. And as I was thinking about this morning, I thought, you know, if only during that long period of time after OPAC got the information from TISPAC and months went on in the process before it came down to the hearing, if only we would have had a legal counsel who could have advised us and told us that this wasn't going to be constitutional. Well, we did, but unfortunately we didn't get that word. So that's one issue. The second I'll bring up, I was serving on OPAC as North Coast Commercial Fishing Lab. And Goal 19, as you recall from the, it's in the letter, it says the commission has to make 2 findings, and one is that they meet Goal 19, the last 4 planning goals, including Goal 19. Goal 19, implement implementation requirements. It's very short. It's a 2-page thing. You can Google Oregon Goal 19 and it pops right up. It talks about uses of ocean resources and their implementation requirements. It says A, maintain and restore renewable marine resources, and B, protect. And it lists all the things that we have to protect. Biological diversity, important habitats, and then it gets to number 4, areas important to fishers and fisheries, areas of high catch, areas, and on D, areas important to commercial or recreational fisheries, including individual ports or particular fleets. When the state changed the state staff report changed the sites from what OPAC had, they included a very, very high value area off Camp Rylea. Camp Rylea, OPAC had a Camp Rylea site 1 mile offshore, 3 miles north-south. The state staff report had one 3 miles offshore and 3 miles north-south. They also included a site at Nestucca. Both of those areas had a tremendous amount of public testimony about how critically important they were to the commercial fishing industry. In particular, of a particular fleet. It was like this language from Goal 19 written decades ago couldn't have been more directly appropriate to the situation we faced. And yet, this Goal 19 says that you shall protect them. It doesn't say you shall protect them unless someone wants to develop wave energy, unless someone wants to do offshore mining or aquaculture or some other use. It says you shall protect these values. So we took that seriously. OPAC made those recommendations based on that. And if you look at the staff report, it even says at the Camp Rylea site that it said normally this site, the staff site, which was much larger than the OPAC version, said normally this wouldn't be eligible for a REFSA area. But, and then they went on, well, there is no but. This Goal 19 says you shall protect it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate your testimony and, of course, all your previous service to OPAC. As one of I like calling this the alumni group. It's fun. I'm sure that somehow we will get some of this history incorporated into the workshop if an education process if we decide to move forward with that. So thank you.
Is this mic working?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You were holding this, I wasn't sure.
It's easier in some ways to hold that one than have to move forward.
Okay, so for the record, David Allen, resident of Newport and former OPAC member, so glad to see everyone here around the table and appreciate this opportunity for public comment. So I'm going to go over a couple points that were mentioned earlier in the presentation and the agenda item on Part 5, and perhaps recommend a path forward that you might want to consider if you do send any requests to LCDC after this meeting is concluded. So initially, I just wanted to point out, as Scott pointed out, Charlie raised a very important point about why was this challenge undertaken if it was just procedural. Well, yes, it was a procedural challenge, but the reason it was utilized was through that procedural challenge, we tried to address some of the substantive outcomes that occurred with the actual decision that was made by LCDC. So we used procedure to get to substance. So there was a connection. And as Scott pointed out, there were a lot of differences between the OPAC recommendation and the LCDC recommendation or adoption that we wanted to at least point out and perhaps have reconsidered in the future if we did prevail on the legal challenge, which we did. And hopefully that will be addressed in the coming months through whatever process you use. Second, there's some discussion about, well, what should we do now? There's this language in the Part 5 document that no longer is valid, but it's still there, about revisiting Part 5 within 7 years. Well, we're already on year 5 of that 7-year period. I would suggest that that language is very open-ended, meaning it says no longer than 7 years. And it also refers to the statute which OPAC operates under, which says OPAC, at its request or at the request of the agency, can revisit the territorial sea plan at any point in time in which it believes it needs to be revisited. So even though it says 7 years, if Part 5, as OPAC recommended, was adopted, and that 7-year language was in there, that just sets perhaps a benchmark. It's not set in stone, meaning 7 years or nothing. It means up to 7 years. And if you wanted to revisit Part 5 within 2 years, I don't see anything that would prevent you from doing so either under the Part 5 document or the statute that you operate under. So I don't think that's really the kind of issue that perhaps Steve was trying to suggest or at least was advising on earlier on. But again, that's just my point of view. Finally, the appellate judgment, and I agree, Steve indicated an appellate judgment has to issue before any further action can be taken. I think there's a way to expedite that appellate judgment, and I'll speak with some of the legal counsels on the other side and see if we can get that expedited, so at least this can be considered sooner rather than later if the Court of Appeals is going to take a while in getting that appellate judgment issued. And now finally, getting into what you may want to consider doing next. You have a letter in front of you that was prepared by Wade Belmont, who's the Lincoln County Legal Counsel, and myself, with the support of all 7 coastal counties, meaning all 7 Board of Commissioners, all 7 counties with the Board of Commissioners supported this letter over the past month. And I'm going to differ with Steve on one point. Back in 2013, in January, LCDC made findings. And those findings said that OPAC made all the required consistency recommendations under ORS 196471 with respect to the statutory requirements and the goals that are applicable. So OPAC did its job. LCDC differed with it, but OPAC did its job, and under the statute, as the Court of Appeals opinion indicated, if all the findings have been made by LCDC that OPAC complied and did what was necessary, I don't think there's any wiggle room as far as LCDC changing it or sending it back down to OPAC. I think they either have to adopt OPAC's recommendation, or if they want to change their own findings, they have to do so. So right now, I think it's in LCDC's court as far as what they want to do. But I believe they should adopt OPAC's recommendation, and if they want to revisit Part 5 within the next few years, or if OPAC wants to revisit Part 5 within the next few years, there's nothing that prevents you from doing so. Scott, and I'm not going to speak for Scott, but Scott brought up that specific language regarding the PUMA language. That might be outside the scope of the statute. And if LCDC is not comfortable with that delegation of authority issue, they can always send, I think, that specific issue back down to OPAC. OPAC can develop a working group with the stakeholders like Scott's group, OFCC, and some others. Work out some language that's acceptable to both parties, have OPAC look at it, and send it back up to LCDC. That's only if LCDC thinks it's a delegation of authority issue. And again, in the order that Jim Rue issued back in October of 2013, it said potential delegation of authority issue. I don't think they did all the research necessary to each actually reach a final conclusion on that. So if LCDC wants to look at this issue again regarding the PUMA language, I think perhaps the legal counsel should do a more thorough analysis so it's not just a potential delegation of authority issue, it either is or isn't. So there's some clarity on that particular issue. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The next person that signed up to testify isn't here, but wrote a quick statement for me to read, so I'm just going to read it to you. It is public comment from Dave Lacey, who's owner of the South Coast Tour LLC, on the topic of oil and gas leasing. He said, he writes here, I would like to voice my strong opposition to any offshore oil and gas exploration or leasing. I would support inclusion of Oregon's opposition into the territorial sea plan. Let's codify it into law. Thank you, Dave Lacey. I probably didn't read it exactly how he would have said it. Next to testify is Todd from Coos Bay Surfer.
Madam Chair, members, thank you very much for this opportunity to comment. My name is Todd Buchholz, and I'm the chair of the Oregon chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. I'm sure you're all aware of that foundation with Charlie being on the board here. We represent 150 members here in Coos Bay, Coos County, up and down the coast, a little bit up to Newport. We adamantly, obviously, and very strongly support a moratorium on any gas and offshore oil exploration or drilling for a number of reasons. One of which very personal. I just attended a family reunion down in Louisiana and Alabama about 4 months ago. Just picture in your mind the Deepwater Horizon 8 years ago. Oil splashed up on our rocky shores. Oil splashed into our commercial fishing nets and our crab boats. Oil everywhere. 8 years later, my wife's family, who were commercial fishers for over 20 years, are still digging out economically out of that event. 8 years later, the hit to their coastal environment and the economies and people that depend on that environment is huge. In the first 3 years, Louisiana lost $150 million in tourist revenue, just in tourist revenue, the first 3 years after that event. Think of that here on the Oregon coast. And think of how you, all of you, and even you in the alumni section back here, will protect your legacy of the work that you've been doing on this committee for a decade and a half almost, 16 years or so you've been pushing forward this Oregon plan. It could all go down the toilet with one Deepwater Horizon off our coast. So I strongly support from our members and from Surfrider, a moratorium on oil and gas exploration within Oregon waters, and hopefully that will give us leverage on a national level to stop this madness. We can't afford that yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last person to testify is Annie.
Hi, thanks for letting me talk today. Can you hear me? I need to get closer. So, I'm here, Annie Pollard. I'm a small business owner here in Coos Bay. I'm here to support a moratorium on all offshore drilling, leasing, exploration, et cetera, as well. Speaking as a small business owner, I own a pub here in Coos Bay, and about half my clientele are locals who live here, and the other half are tourists who visit here. And so the first argument I would make for my opposition to any offshore drilling is that the locals who live here, who I speak with every day while they're drinking their beer, is that it's not really part of our identity as people who live in coastal areas. We're here because of beauty. We're here because we have public beaches that we all have access to. They're clean and gorgeous. I also speak with people who are visiting here, and they're visiting here for the same reason that people live in coastal communities. It's beautiful here. They have access to all the beaches. Our state parks are overflowing in the summer. So I don't believe that it's part of the identity of visitors as well as people who live here. The second reason that I'm in strong opposition is more of an economic one. So coastal communities would suffer the brunt of any negative impacts of coastal drilling, and those negative impacts range from bad to catastrophic. And so if we are going to bear the brunt of these negative impacts, we need to have some sort of extreme positive benefits from them. And I just have a really hard time envisioning what those benefits would be. My family, my extended family is exclusively in the oil industry. All of them work in the oil industry. And when they're working on the rigs, they 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off is a pretty typical schedule. And they choose to live wherever they want. They often don't even live in Louisiana anymore. They've moved away. They've moved to places that have really low property values. They've moved to places that have really good schools. They can live anywhere because they can fly. So I don't expect that the jobs that would be brought in would actually benefit coastal communities particularly because of that. That's about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.